2018 meeting of the Falmouth Conservation Commission is called to order. First item of business is to
Cell phones?
vote minutes. Oh, okay. For those of you who are not used to our procedures, could you please silence your, whatever devices you may have with you? And also, everyone is welcome to speak at the appropriate time, but you must come to the podium and identify yourself and use the microphone. All right, so, vote minutes. First, we have November 7th, 2018.
I've read them. I move that we accept as written.
Second.
Okay, I have a couple very small changes that I'm gonna pass down to the recording secretary, but they're not really worth
Then I
discussion.
will adjust my motion to accept as edited.
As amended, yeah, second then.
Okay, thank you. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, unanimous, so moved. And next we have the minutes of November 16th.
Madam Chair, I read those and found them to be correct. Madam Chair, I do have one correction that you may want to make on the minutes.
Okay,
I believe, Courtney, if you can hand me the 16th.
I don't have them.
I
I can look
I
at
have them.
it. I know exactly where it is. On 125 Little Neck Bars Road, move to adopt order as discussed. I think it was adopt order as proposed.
yes,
Okay.
yes. Okay, thank you.
Did you get that, Susan?
Yep.
Okay, cool.
With that correction, I make the motion to accept.
Second.
Any other comments? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, unanimous, so moved. All right, now we have other business. Discuss and vote the Farley Bog conservation restriction. Welcome, Ms. Moynihan.
Thank
Long
you very-
time no see.
Yeah, thank you very much, Madam Chair and members of the commission. I'm Laura Moynihan, a Falmouth attorney, and I represent the Falmouth Rod and Gun Club. So this is a presentation for the commission to approve the proposed conservation restriction for the Farley Bog project. The conservation restriction is a requirement of the agreement with the town for the land transfer to the Falmouth Rod and Gun Club. So there's a purchase and sale agreement. Town meeting voted approval of the land transfer to the Falmouth Rod and Gun Club, and there's a condition of that land transfer that with the deed, there be a permanent conservation restriction approved. So the town of Falmouth, acting through the Conservation Commission, is the grantee of the restriction, and we're hoping that if the commission approves the form of restriction and the selectmen approve the form of restriction, that it can be sent to Boston for final approval, and the land transfer can be completed by the end of this year. So there would, obviously there's a very significant restoration project going on for the Farley Bog and the Childs River that the Rod and Gun Club is going to be starting the permitting on this winter. So you will see the details of that entire project as part of the permitting process, and that's not what I'm presenting tonight because we're not there yet. So I'm going to just give you some brief information on that project as part of the conservation restriction, but I just wanted to clarify that this isn't an application for that permit project. That will be down the road. So this is really our first step. So here we have the GIS map, and right in the center you can see in the yellow highlight the bog area and the Childs River right up against the Mashpee town line, just to orientate you to the location. And this is a map showing the Farley Bog, and then we have the Garner Bog, which is in the town of Mashpee, and the dam and impoundment, which is part of the restoration project as well. again, just to give you a general location of the property. So the project itself, when you see that as part of the permitting, it's going to involve the restoration of 2 cranberry bogs, with 13 acres of bogs. It will involve the rehabilitation of the upper Childs River, about 1.5 miles of river, and creation of a cold water fishery as part of that project. There will be restoration and improvement to the wetland resource areas. They'll be looking at the natural water filtration system to improve the water quality, and improvement of the water storage areas for flood control and sea level rise. Some key project components are removal of the dam and flow control devices in the river, and the removal of sand from the bogs and planting of native vegetation. So it's just a sort of a brief overview of what you will be seeing as part of this restoration project. The estimated project cost is $2 million, and the estimated completion date is the fall of 2020. So where we are now with the project status is we've had the land transfer approved under Article 97 by the Massachusetts Senate. So the Senate is required to approve a land transfer from a municipality, and the Senate has done that with the help of Representative Vieira. The town meeting has approved it as well. Fisheries and Wildlife has reviewed the conservation restriction and the project generally, and has given its support. And Ecological Restoration has done the same, and the engineering's at 60% design phase. This is existing conservation land that abuts the 13 acres that is subject to the conservation restriction before you tonight. So in the yellow area, that land is approximately 100 acres in the town of Falmouth. It is owned by the Falmouth Rod and Gun Club, and it is subject to permanent conservation restrictions now. So you see how it essentially surrounds the Farley Bog. And to the north are the town of Mashpee conservation lands that are also owned by the Rod and Gun Club, about 64 acres. The 2 parcels are marked with the blue tabs, so they're called off of Milford Road, but that's another 64 acres. So right now we have about 164 acres that's in permanent conservation, and then the Farley Bog would complete that entire parcel. This is the conservation restriction map, which is in with the application. So this is showing the 13-acre parcel, which is the bog, part of the river. This is the formal plan that BSS Design has done as part of the survey of the land that will be subject to this CR. And so here we have the benefits from the restriction, protection of the scenic and natural character of the town, flood protection and control, fisheries and wildlife protection and enhancement, protection of the Childs River riparian corridor, maintenance of the water quality, protection of open space, obviously, protection of wildlife habitat, and recreational opportunities for the public. This conservation restriction does provide for public access. So the timetable where we are now in this process for the conservation restriction is the first step being before your commission tonight. Then the Board of Selectmen would review the conservation restriction as well and have to accept it. It would then go to Secretary Beaton in Boston for signature. Then it would come back to us, and it would be recorded with the deed from the town. And so we're hoping to have that process completed by the end of this year. So that is where we are, and I'd be happy to answer any questions that you might have regarding the conservation restriction. I should say it's been reviewed by Ms. McKay as well as Assistant Town Council. It's also been reviewed by Division of Conservation Services through their staff and their legal department, and given approval for submission to you tonight.
Great, thank you very much. Do we have any questions down here? Mark?
How's the work going with Mashpee's part of the permitting?
Well, for the, do you want to answer that? Yeah.
Good evening, I'm Gary Anderson. I'm the treasurer of the Falmouth Rod and Gun Club. I know Mr. Gurney well. I worked with him when he was part of the Mashpee Conservation Commission. We have signed an agreement, a 30-year lease, with the town of Mashpee for the 24.7 acre parcel, which is the northern part of this particular project. So that part is done, and we've got their approval to go ahead with our conservation, our project.
So that lease includes the right to
the
improve the
project.
property?
Exactly, yes.
Very good. Thank you.
Thank you. Peter?
What is your limitation on public use?
The limitation is for daytime use only, and generally speaking, subject to reasonable rules and regulations of the Falmouth Rod and Gun Club. So that is located in the restriction itself, and I can find it for you. So the exact wording is that the Falmouth Rod and Gun Club agrees to take no action to prohibit, discourage, or charge a fee for access to and use of the premises by the general public, but only for daytime use and only as described in the conservation restriction. So again, only for the permitted uses, which would be essentially recreation uses, hiking, passive recreation, so hiking, catch and release, fishing, hunting, things like snowmobiling would be prohibited, motorized vehicles would be prohibited, so passive recreation. The gun club reserves the right to establish reasonable rules, regulations, and restrictions on the permitted recreational uses by the general public for the protection of the conservation values.
Okay,
So
thank you.
fairly generic, but typical.
Okay, thank you. That's it.
Steve, anything? Jamie?
No questions?
I just had one question. Will any of the projects that you're planning to do have any conflicts with the CR? Or it's all right?
The CR contemplates an order of conditions. So in the permitted uses, we had to draft it so that one of the reserved rights is called the wetland area restoration. And it's all activities as permitted by you, the grantee, in any orders of conditions to be issued under the state and local wetlands. So it's fairly open, but again, the control is really with the commission as part of the permitting process for what is permitted there in the restoration.
Kevin?
Thank you. Well said.
Courtney?
No questions.
I have a question. I noticed in page 4 and page 5, one's under the prohibited acts and uses and the other references under the reserved rights and exceptions. There's mention of de minimis commercial recreation, and I don't recall seeing anything about commercial recreation in our previous CRs. I was just wondering what that might refer to or include.
Do you have an exact, is there a sub?
If you, at
paragraph?
page 3, the phrase begins with item 8, the very bottom. The use of the premises for business, residential, or industrial use, or for more than de minimis commercial recreation. And then the other one is page 5, item number 13, under outdoor passive recreational activities. And this is the reserved rights and exceptions, and, you know, it's lists them, and it says, and do not involve more than minimal use for commercial recreational activities.
Okay, yeah, that comes from the state's form of conservation restriction. I mean, I would expect that it's probably there, you know, in the event there's something that's going on in terms of a fishing derby or a fundraiser or something like that, that somebody might consider to be commercial. You know, that might be considered a de minimis commercial activity.
I'm not sure whether the de minimis would refer to the commercial aspect or to the nature of the activity, recreation, but
well, de minimis commercial recreation. So, I think that with these documents, because they go on in perpetuity and because in order to amend them, you have to really go to the state legislature after multiple
Right.
amendments, that the DCS form, I expect, includes that language for those types of passive recreational activities that somebody might come along and say, well, that's commercial activity because you're raising money, or you're having a fishing derby, or you're having something else that could go on the property where money was involved, which I think is the intention here.
Okay, so cover the bases.
Cover the bases, yeah.
All right. Jen, do you remember seeing this in other?
I don't remember offhand.
Okay.
I don't.
Well, anyway, I was curious about that. And I have a few things that I'd like to just hand over to you. They're minor, very minor, and not very many little edits where I think maybe a word is missing or something like that. Yeah, it'd take you less than 10 minutes to look at that. And it's just the main text.
Okay. All right, thank you.
Thank you.
Done?
We could have a motion.
Jen?
Oh, Jen, did you want to?
No, I'm all set.
You're all set. All right.
I'll make a motion to
Vote.
accept as discussed, offered.
Second?
All right. Is there anyone else in the public who would like to make any comments or ask any questions about this? All right. Hearing no public comment, all those in favor of accepting the CR, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Unanimous. So moved. Thank you very much.
Thank you
and
very
good
much.
luck.
Thank
It's a
you.
great project.
Appreciate it, thank you.
Okay, before we move on to the next thing that's printed on the agenda, I would like to announce something that happened late and didn't make it on here. We have a request for a continuance of a notice of intent, and that is for 26 Ferry Road. So if anybody happens to be here for that hearing, it's not going to happen tonight. Jen, can you tell us when it will be continued to? Do you have a date?
Yes, just first, it did come in a week or so ago. We just missed it on the agenda.
Oh,
So
okay.
it didn't come in late, so I don't want the board to feel that it did. Mr. Borselli was a little concerned about that. So that was a staff error, and they are requesting a continuance until December 5th, so 1 week.
So moved.
Second.
All right, all those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed, unanimous, so moved. Thank you.
The landscape plan.
All right, now, request for determination of applicability. Again, for those of you who aren't familiar with our hearings, for this type of an application, the applicant wants to hear a negative determination, because that means that they are not required to move to a more stringent application and level of review. So negative determination is good for the applicant. First, we have Rod Komar, 164 Acapesket Road, East Falmouth, for permission to replace 3 existing stone walls with concrete retaining walls.
Madam Chair, the staff recommends a -2 determination under the state and bylaw. Resource area boundaries are not confirmed by this RDA.
So moved.
Second.
Any questions or comments from the board?
Madam Chair,
Yes.
the applicant has an open OC.
For a dock.
How's that progress on that?
Oh, it's pretty much done.
Okay,
This is just a few retaining walls he wants to fix.
okay. And you're satisfied with the progress on that?
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you. Anything else? Anything from the public? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, unanimous, so moved. Christopher Neal, 62 John Parker Road, Falmouth, Massachusetts, for permission to install up to 3 groundwater monitoring wells.
Madam Chair, the staff recommends a -2 determination under the state and bylaw. Resource area boundaries are not confirmed by this RDA.
So moved.
Second.
Okay, I have a question. Is the listed applicant representing someone else in this, or is he the property owner?
John Parker Road, we're the property owner?
Yeah.
So this
Right.
is a monitoring well.
Right, I'm just wondering if the town should be, he should be listed as in care of, or on behalf of the town of Falmouth or something like
Oh,
that.
it was done. Let me just double check that.
Yeah, good point.
Says applicant, not really property owner. If you want to continue that, we can amend it and re-advertise it for the December 12th, if you'd like.
Well, I would be willing to go with your recommendation. You're more expert in these matters. It's just caught my eye because.
No, I understand. And I did have a conversation with Mr. Neal about the installation of the monitoring wells, which is allowed under the bylaw and the state.
Right, right. I have no
so-
problem with the application per se.
And he has the permission of the landowner?
Well, you are basically care and control of the landowner, but why don't we continue this until, that was a nice catch, Mary, why don't we continue this to the 5th, and I'll get an opinion from Pat.
Thank you.
I'll
All right.
withdraw my motion.
And I withdraw my second.
All right. So, motion to continue?
Make a motion to continue till December 5th.
Second.
All right. Any other questions or comments from the board? Anything from the public? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, unanimous, so moved. Gerard and Marcia Testa, 19 Ocean Avenue, East Falmouth, for permission to remove existing garage and decks, to construct new garage with addition, new screen porch over existing patio, landscape step and landing, remove existing front entry and construct new step with covered entry and all associated utilities and landscaping.
Madam Chair, the staff recommends a -2 under the state and bylaw. Resource area boundaries are not confirmed by this RDA.
So move.
Second.
All right, any comments or questions from the board? Anything from the public? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, unanimous, so moved. Matthew Joyce, 137 T-Ticket Highway, Falmouth, for permission to install utility cable along edge of road to connect to Entertainment Cinema.
Madam Chair, the staff recommends a -2 determination under the state and bylaw. Resource area boundaries are not confirmed by this RDA.
So move.
Second.
Questions or comments from the board, from the public? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, unanimous, so moved. Richard and Jean Abrams, 217 Edgewater Drive West, East Falmouth, for permission to construct a second-story addition above existing structure and to add 50 square feet of new coverage over existing driveway.
Madam Chair, the staff recommends a -2 determination under the state and bylaw. Resource area boundaries are not confirmed by this RDA.
So move.
Second.
Okay, what is meant by new coverage over the existing driveway? Is that second-floor house or something?
Yeah, that was a bit of a typo. Yeah, it's not quite new coverage because it's over the existing driveway. It's just a addition that they're closing out.
Okay, so it's not creating any more impermeable surface, okay.
And the only other question I had is, it's 50 square feet in the V zone, am I correct? Just so that they don't get too, it says the VE 14. Just that they only have 150 extra square feet in the future, so they only can add 200 without,
No, they're outside.
okay, perfect.
You're outside the reason, good.
All right.
All right, anything else from the board? Anything from the public? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, unanimous, so moved. Jewett Realty Trust Number 3, 33 and 37 Penzance Road, Woods Hole, for permission to repair existing seawall and steps.
Madam Chair, the staff recommends a -2 determination under the state and bylaw. Resource area boundaries are not confirmed by this RDA.
So move.
Second.
Any questions or comments from the board? Anything from the public? All those in favor say aye. Opposed, unanimous, so moved. Donna Spardella, 38 Deer Run Lane, North Falmouth, for permission to expand existing deck, construct an addition over existing porch, install mitigation plantings for after-the-fact approval of unpermitted patio.
Madam Chair, the applicant requested a continuance to December 5th meeting.
So, at the request of the applicant, we'll continue this to December 5th.
Second.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Unanimous, so moved. Gracie Septic Inspections LLC, 330 Edgewater Drive East, East Falmouth, for permission to replace failed components of the Title V septic system, remove 4 trees, and plant 4 replacement trees.
Madam Chair, the staff recommends a -2 determination under the state and bylaw. Resource area boundaries are not confirmed by this RDA.
So moved.
Second.
For the record, I'll recuse.
Okay, Jamie is recused.
I just had one question, Brennan. The 35-inch beech tree, they're doing a brand-new system for failed. There's nowhere else they can move it on the lot without losing the 35-inch beech and the 31-inch cedar?
So they're not doing an upgrade, they're just replacing the failed components of the tank. So the tree roots grew into the tank and into the pipes. So they're just replacing those in kind.
And that warrants taking down all those trees?
That is the recommendation of the applicant and the engineer.
Okay. How close are they to the tank?
On top of it.
On top of it? Okay.
Come in tomorrow, Maury, and I'll show you the type.
Oh, I know it happened.
Yeah, with all the roots. It
Anything,
looked like the trees were there when the tank was installed. We double-checked the aerials. The tank was installed in, the system was
2004.
2004. So I don't know what happened. But the trees were there in 2004, when they put the system in, and I don't know what happened to the system,
Right.
why it
They're
was
just substantial.
compromised.
You know, 35-inch beech is,
Oh, they're massive.
I know.
well, a lot
Yeah,
of root growth apparently.
well, well, move the tank. I mean, you don't have to put the tank in the same spot.
No, I mean, as to
Anyway,
what
okay.
happened. All right, anything else from the board? Anything from the public? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, unanimous, so moved. Okay, moving along now, request for hearings under a notice of intent. All hearings of the Falmouth Conservation Commission are held simultaneously under the authorities of the Massachusetts Wetlands Protection Act and the Falmouth Wetlands Bylaw. Although a single decision of the commission is issued, it represents a separate decision under each authority. So, first tonight, we have Gregory Nickel. Oh, could somebody please, turn the lights back up? Thank you. Gregory Nickel, 19 Woodneck Road, Falmouth, Mass. For permission to raise and rebuild existing dwelling with an enclosed porch, deck, stairs, and landing, including all associated clearing, grading, utilities, and landscaping. Actually, might have been premature, maybe a little lowering of the lights would be helpful for Raoul's presentation. And everybody's eyesight.
Got any better?
That's good.
Yeah, that's good.
That's
Nap's
good,
over.
thank you.
Good evening. For the record, Raul Lizardi from Cape and Islands Engineering, representing the applicant and the owner, Gregory Nichols. The project is located at number 19 Woodnet Road in Falmouth. The project intends to raise the existing dwelling and reconstruct a new dwelling on the same foundation. Resources on or within 100 feet of the project are a salt marsh, a BVW, a coastal bank adjacent to the BVW, and then a secondary coastal bank on the opposite side of a driveway on the abutting property, and land subject to coastal storm flowage. The proposed project does not increase impervious surfaces or structures. In fact, because of the reduction in size of the landing at the new entrance for the new house, there is a reduction of approximately 7 square feet in the A buffer zone. There's also a proposed dry wells to improve on runoff. The 3 dry wells are proposed to collect all the roof runoff from the new structure. And there's a proposed limit of work along the existing clearing. All the work is proposed to take place within cleared areas or within the existing footprint of the structure. If there's any questions, I'll be happy to answer.
Thank you. All right, Courtney, would you like to start off? Or, excuse me, one second. Jen, do you
I
have
don't have
anything?
any questions.
All right.
Do you have a structural engineer check that foundation?
The builder is the one that got to us saying that they can use the existing foundation. We didn't do our own investigation of it.
I mean, I went out and looked at that, and it's a concrete block foundation.
It is concrete block, yes.
There's cracks in it. I think when your guy goes to demolish the building, I don't see how he's gonna save that foundation. Now, that's not problematic for me personally, but it does affect the scope of work. Because now, if you have to excavate for new foundation, now you have overdig, you have more site issues, and
You have to come back.
if you can save yourself and us a lot of time by maybe revising your proposal to include all of the eventuality that you have to do that, so you won't have to come back and talk to us.
Right. That same question was brought forward to the builder, and the response is that they can use the foundation.
Well, that's fine.
so-
If you can use it, then you're home free. But if you can't use it, then you're gonna have to come in and file for an amended permit. That's gonna delay your project. Wouldn't it be better to take care of that eventuality now, and so we can properly condition it?
If the board is willing to condition it that the same project with a new foundation could be conditioned here, we have no problems with that.
Or we could continue the hearing and is another option, rather than having you, file a whole.
Yeah, I mean, I'd wanna see what what safeguards you're in. That's we're not in the business of designing your project.
Okay.
For the record, James Bustamante, Longfellow Design Build. In regards to the foundation, the structural engineer, Tom Galligan, has proposed filling in the block foundation with mortar that would reinforce the
Fill in the
foundation
cores, yeah.
to, exactly.
Do you have a statement from the engineer, James?
I don't, but I'd be happy to supply a letter as a condition.
It has to be a filled basement.
What happens if you can't save it?
In regards to the existing foundation?
Yeah, I mean, I'm not trying to hang you up.
No, absolutely. He's already looked at the,
I just, I've been in this business, in the construction business for a long time.
absolutely. He's already,
And I understand how these things work.
yep,
You go in and you have, the road to hell is paved with good intentions. And you say, oh yeah, I'm gonna save that structure. And you go in there, and oh, gee whiz, all the top course fell off.
right.
Oh, well, gee whiz, the thing's slumping over here. Well, now I gotta tear it up. Now I gotta put a full foundation in. That means excavation, overdig, containment of soils and so forth. It's a change in the scope of work. And you would have to come back, file for an amended permit. That would delay your project. You couldn't proceed till you did it.
Correct.
So I'm saying, save yourself and us the time, do it now, and then you have the flexibility of approaching your project any way you want.
But he just stated that a structural engineer has approved reuse by filling the cores.
Well, I mean, I understand that, but I mean, he's gotta get the building out first, and
Yeah.
I have serious questions as to whether or not you could be that
If
surgical in
there-
a demolition.
If there was a condition to the board that we supplied a letter from the engineer stating that we would reinforce the foundation with mortar and rebar, would that be sufficient?
Really our
I'd have to,
jurisdiction anyway.
I'll leave that to some of the
In
other
any
construction.
event, if the foundation fails at any time during construction, you're gonna have to come back to us for an amended, permit.
Right.
Okay, so if you're proceeding ahead here, you're doing it your risk and the client's risk.
So if you
That's
provide
clear.
us a letter from your from your structural engineer, which this board, routinely, requires, if you provide that to us, and what they're saying is at any point in the construction, if that, foundation does need to be removed, you're gonna have to go back to the building department, we're gonna flag it in the building department, and if you're redoing the foundation, then we're going to have you file an amendment. So it's your choice at this time, as the
mean, the other-
project team, whether or not you want to amend or not. I have one
Yeah.
quick question, Jamie?
Well, my sense is that whether they supply the letter from the engineer or not, we're going to have our requirements if it fails.
Oh,
So
absolutely.
the letter, we don't
Absolutely.
really need the letter.
Yeah.
I mean, you're gonna need something from an engineer anyway
For the building
to show
department,
that
not
that
for us.
foundation can support a
Not for
larger
us.
structure.
But not for us, for the building department.
No, I understand.
Yeah.
Is that what you said, Jamie, not for us?
No, not for us, but
So anyway,
Fine.
So
there's a risk here.
Yeah, the
Be aware
applicant
of
is-
it, and decide accordingly, so.
The applicant is confident that the reinforcement will work, but should the case be that the foundation doesn't support the new structure, then we'll come back with an amendment.
Okay.
Okay, anything else, Courtney?
no.
Okay, Kevin?
No, it's a small lot with all kinds of, lines driven, shown through it, but they're replacing it in the same foundation, and, good luck to you.
Yep.
Right.
No questions?
Okay, Jamie?
No questions.
I don't have any questions, Madam Chair.
Peter? I have two questions. I assume you're not increasing the number of bedrooms?
That's correct.
Okay. And you mentioned an overall benefit, improvement here, but there's no mitigation, so can you just tell me what that is? Benefit is?
The benefits are the reduction in structure square footage and the installation of dry wells to control roof runoff. We don't expect any runoff problems because between this property and the salt marsh and BVW, there is an existing driveway that's kind of like built up. So any runoff will probably just end up in that little depression between the driveway on the abutting property and the backyard of this subject property. But it is still an improvement. Dry wells are just gonna take all the water and discharge it instead of letting it run and pool in that low area. Those are the two improvements: reduction of 7 square feet of impervious surfaces and dry wells.
Okay. 7 square feet is 7 square feet.
Mary,
Yes.
Brendan has one quick question.
Certainly.
I was out there today and I noticed an underground irrigation system. I don't know if anybody else saw
Yeah, I
that.
saw that.
Don't think that's supposed to be there.
I have no information on that.
That will probably need to be removed, Ravel.
Yeah, we can cover that in deliberation and add a condition depending on how that's decided. If you
We-
want to say something about it, that's fine.
We can agree to the removal of the irrigation system.
Okay, great. Just a minute. You can certainly speak in a minute. Normally, we put a motion on the floor before we hear from the public, so. So Raul, I assume you will not be wanting a continuance. Is that right?
I'm sorry, what's
I
that?
assume you don't want a continuance?
No continuous,
Okay.
if we can.
Can I make a motion to close the hearing and take it under advisement?
Second.
All right. Anything else from the board at this time? All right, anything from the public? You have to come up to the podium, sir.
Good evening, everyone. I'm Gregory Nickel. I'm the owner of the property. The irrigation system was installed on one of the original mitigation projects. When we added a shed on the previous history of the project, we had to put a significant amount of plantings on the property. And so that was the key reason for the system's installation.
Yeah, that's often the case, and usually the order conditions would allow that to remain in place for, what, 2 years or so?
And it has to be an above-ground irrigation system, not
yeah,
a
right.
subsurface irrigation
Not a
system.
subsurface.
Okay. Well,
So,
no problem. I just wanted to make, for the record, that's the reason why it was
Yeah, and-
installed, but we can remove it.
okay, yes, I think you're going to have to.
Thank you.
Thank you. Anything else, Jen?
No.
Okay. All right, all those in favor of closing the hearing, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, unanimous, so moved.
Thank you.
Thank you. Next, we have Robert and Christine Clark, 237 Dusty Miller Road, map 48-04-005-237, Falmouth, Massachusetts, for permission to construct a single-family dwelling, Title V septic system, driveway, retaining walls, patio, and all associated clearing, grading, utilities, and landscaping. Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you for the record. My name is Tom Bunker with BSS Design. We prepared this plan. Let you know, this first plan is the GIS map. To give you an idea of where we're talking about, this is lot 237 Dusty Miller Road. There's this lot outlined in yellow. There's Dusty Miller Road on the uphill side. Racing Beach Avenue is down here. Buzzards Bay itself is just off here. You see there's a wetland down in this area. And I had just been before you a few weeks ago for this number 22, where we discussed how some of this had been filled to create some of these house lots on the seaward side of this wetland. Now we're here, one of the few lots, vacant lots left. Well, there's this one, another one over here, in this Racing Beach neighborhood. You see we have a velocity zone, VE elevation 18. The land goes from wetland level down around elevation 3 or 4 up to elevation 32, 38 up on Racing Beach Ave. I believe it is. So I have the our plan of the existing conditions. This wetland here, which used to be a cranberry bog, it's overgrown. In this location, it's quite open and grassy through here with cranberry plants. And there's a fringe edge of shrub, wetland shrub here by Burnham. Some bayberry through here, cedar trees, and then almost immediately there's a bank right along this area, and it goes into predominantly oak. White oak, mainly white oak down on the bottom here, and then we get into other oaks and some cherry trees and some cedar trees mixed in. The velocity zone traced on is at this elevation here, this solid purple line. The below this flood zone is pretty much all coastal bank on this lot, and the coastal bank extends further uphill where the slope is steeper than 4 to 1. So up to this location right here, we have coastal bank and dips down, then back up again. And so we have these resource areas, the vegetated wetland down here, the coastal bank. There we have the 50-foot zone A of the wetland running along this line, and then there's another 50-foot zone B of the wetland running through here. And the coastal bank being in this location, have coastal bank in a velocity zone. There's a 50-foot zone A. You have this line running through here is the zone A. No disturbance, no touch zone in there. And then another 50 feet of zone B in this location, and there's a small corner here that's more than 100 feet from any other resource area. So on this plan, we have the trees located, and we have X's through all of the trees that will be removed. Actually, I think there's a couple more up here that we missed. There is, not on this plan, but a letter just that's submitted. There will be about 28 oak trees and 1 or so cherry trees. These are the significant trees, total of 396 inches of diameter will be removed. But the letter goes on to say that, of course, all of these are in the zone B. Nothing in the zone A will be touched. And actually, not all are in the zone B. Some are outside jurisdiction. So the next plan, our site plan. So obviously, we have the same resource areas colored the same way here, and the zone A running through here. And it's on the other plan. I didn't mention that I showed the limit of work running right through here. Silt fence or stake bales. And I always have to mention the 25-foot Falmouth wetland velocity zone right through here.
We appreciate that.
Yeah. Although I've heard that when it's on a steep bank like this and goes right into a zone X, that maybe that extra 25 feet won't matter, and it doesn't matter in this case anyway, because we're not in it.
It's a blunt instrument.
Is that?
It's a blunt instrument.
Yeah. Well, this coastal bank is a blunt instrument too, coming back here. So anyway, we have just this area and the corner of this lot available for development, and it's a fairly small house. We have it's 2,500 square feet of structure down in this location. Had to have the driveway come in here because the house had to be pulled back down the hill so that the septic system could fit up in this corner, and then the garage, and then this is a small walkout, or a walkout to a small lawn area below. And because of the slope of this in this corner of the lot, I have a series of walls. I have one wall and some steps going down here, and a few feet high, another little wall and steps going down to the lower level, and then this wall running parallel to the property line, but a few feet back, which will, it varies between at grade, and then I think it's about 5 or 6 feet high here, and it's at grade, and 4 or 5 feet high here, and then when you get down to here, it's about, I think about 3 feet high. The bottom elevation is 25 of the lawn, and the lowest grade is 22 at the bottom of the wall. So it's this last wall here is a 3 feet high maximum. On this side, a patio and a walk system. This little landscape feature, sort of a masonry deck and landing. This will be a little grill area right here, and then some steps going up to the house, and then some other steps going back down here. So we fit it in here. The septic system is outside of the 100 feet, and we've contained everything outside of the A zone as required. We don't have a proper planting plan, but again, the entire A zone of the coastal bank is and will remain vegetated. The A and B zone of the wetland is and will remain vegetated. So that is our proposal. I'll take questions.
Thank you, Tom. Mark? Jen, I'm sorry.
I have no questions, no.
Thank you.
I don't have any comments. You've certainly crammed that way off in the corner of the lot, which is where you have to put it, and I think that's great. Leaves the buffer zone.
It's nice in a way, because there's a bench right here, and the bench needs a little fixing up, so maybe you can put that in the order condition so they can fix the bench. But it's a nice spot, so otherwise a house should be right there.
Right.
And so, you know, would be a nice spot to sit out there. But yeah, it had to go in the corner.
No comments.
Peter?
The oak trees that are going to be removed for the construction, they seem to be an unusual type. They are growing almost on the ground instead of up. Is that a variety or?
I don't believe that's right. I don't know if there's wind damage from time to time. I mean, there's, you know, a lot of that, especially down here, a lot of trees are shorter. And I'm just wondering about that, if possibly they're killed by salt from Hurricane Bob and they're just growing up. Or and also the wind, you know, there's a lot of wind there. And yeah, a lot of them are white oaks, and so I don't know if they just lay down and put.
It's a nice design to make use of the BSR. No further questions.
Thank you. Steve?
Yeah, we've had a number of projects where they try to squeeze too big of a house into an available area, but this seems to be entirely appropriate for the space available. No question.
Jamie?
Al Bundy called, he wants his shoehorn back. No questions.
Well, to balance that out, I'll just say on behalf of Betsy, who's not here, that she would be very happy to see that there's an envelope, and you got your project inside the envelope,
Right.
so. Lori?
I just had one question, Tom.
Yes.
Where you're gonna be building that wall, I know it's just Versalock, and it's not gonna be a big, huge footing, I don't think.
No.
I mean, you're not showing a huge footing, even though it's 5 feet tall, but you are only 2 foot off that lot line.
Yes.
So
They
I
don't
just wanna
take-
make sure that you can get your straw bales out and still build it, and, you know, that's not giving the guys any room to, their butts can't even go over the line.
It's not, but yeah, as you know, it's not a concrete footing.
Right,
We build
so
on that, so
they're
it could
gonna
be,
do it all from the inside, and
Yeah,
then
and it'll be stepped up as
drag
the
your
grade
straw
goes
bales
up.
out after they're
Yeah.
all rotted and, yeah, okay.
So we can't return the shoehorn until after.
I know,
the-
not until after those are out, because that's the only thing,
Yeah.
just the abutter might have an issue, because it really is, it's just a straw bale's width, and that's it, so.
Yeah.
And we usually like to give the contractors room to work, and
They'll have to start with that wall.
3 inches,
The
you gave them
abutters
3
are
inches.
working on theirs,
Start
too.
with the wall.
Not even, actually. Okay, so,
Time for
and
good
thank you for getting
relations.
that in that small space.
The architect helped.
And nature helped, gave you that up in the highland.
Okay,
Not
all
bad.
set? Kevin?
Basically, the only, after being on the site, I guess the only question I would have, somebody bought this huge lot so he could put a house in about a fifth of it. And all of the trees, if you look as a normal plan here, when you have 10-inch oaks and 12-inch oaks and all these things, it all looks as though they're 6 foot tall. Okay? I mean, or 8 foot, whatever the height, they're all the same height. It's like some, you know, somebody came down and trimmed them all. How, I wouldn't know. Is there a possibility that at some point these things will actually grow and they'll have a house with a magnificent view and, you know, 12-inch oaks in front of them?
I don't, as I mentioned, there's a lot of wind there. Generally, these would, I would think they'd stay pretty low or grow slowly. But they, you know,
As
as,
long as it's slow enough and they understand that that could be in the future, good luck to
yeah,
them.
well,
I think you did a great job, whoever did a great job of fitting an awful lot into not much.
Courtney?
Everybody said it all.
Okay.
I make a motion to close and take it under advisement.
All right, anything else from the board? Anything from the public on this application? Yes, ma'am. Please come up to the podium and identify yourself.
I am the owner of the land, and I did a little research on the trees, and I agree. The engineer, Tom, and Garrett Fraz is our architect, did a great job. I looked up what kind of trees have the low-lying tree limbs, and I found angel oaks.
They're not angel oaks.
They're not angel oaks. And, I plan on making that lot look even better than it looks now, and I don't care how much the trees grow. We realize what it is, and it's our dream home, so I don't mind all those trees, and we're not worried. If you notice, in the area, there are trees that are cut right straight away, and ours are a little irregular. I don't think any work has been done on those trees in years, and that's all right with us. But anyway, thank you.
Thank you, and good luck with your project. All right. All those in favor of closing the hearing, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Unanimous. So moved. Thank you.
all right, thank you.
Next, Robert and Maura McCormick, 93 T-Ticket Ave, East Falmouth, for permission to raise and reconstruct existing dwelling, construct deck, porch, and garage, upgrade to a Title V septic system, install mitigation plantings, removal of invasive plants, and all associated clearing, grading, and landscaping. All right, thanks. Thank you.
Madam Chairman, members of the commission, my name is Michael Borselli. I represent the applicant. I'm joined tonight by Teresa Sprague from Blue Flax Design. The applicant is proposing to raise and reconstruct an existing single-family dwelling at the property in question, which is 93 T-Ticket Path. This property may be familiar to some of you. An order of conditions was issued to construct a fixed pier. A certificate of compliance was subsequently issued for that. The property is on the waters of Perch Pond with wetland resources, including obviously land under the ocean, a very small beach, salt marsh, then a sloping landform that meets the definition of coastal bank. There's 2 flood zones on the property. If you look at this blue line, flood hazard zone AE12 goes from the blue line seaward, and then above that line is flood zone X, which is not a special flood hazard zone. The top of Coastal Bank is delineated on the plan. It's been delineated in the location where the slope is between 4:1 and 10:1, just seaward of the flood boundary. The associated no disturbance zone A and outer buffer zone B from the coastal bank is shown, as well as the 100-foot no disturbance zone A from the salt marsh. If you look in your plan package, you'll have an existing conditions plan as well as a proposed plan. This rendered version shows the existing house currently on the property in a light black line. I'm showing the outline with the mouse. The proposed house and decks are shown in a tan color. The proposed driveway is shown in gray. So you can see that the proposed house has been designed to shift landward away from the wetland resources, basically about the width of the existing deck on the existing house. So this is a typical redevelopment project in accordance with FWR 10.18. The house is not moving closer to the wetland resources. In fact, it's moving landward of the wetland resources. We have itemized on the plan, I'm trying to get to the notes, a summary of the impervious surfaces, both existing and proposed. The net result of this analysis is there's actually a net decrease in the no disturbance zone A of 92 square feet. There is an increase in the outer buffer zone B. We took a credit for the decrease, if you look at the math, and then applied the factor 2-to-1 for work within the outer buffer zone B. So the required mitigation planting worked out to 1,320 square feet. We're proposing 1,400 square feet of mitigation planting. Those areas are shown in this green color on my plan and much more detail on the Blue Flax design plans. The proposed septic system is shown more than 100 feet from all wetland resources in this location. In blue, there's a 1,500-gallon septic tank and a leaching field. We're proposing dry wells on the property, showing a limit of work in this red color in this location. And it actually wraps up around the boundary line of the property here. There's actually no trees proposed to be removed. There's one 14-inch deciduous tree here that's in close proximity, but we've had conversations with Teresa and the owner, and we think we can save that tree. So as of right now, it's not proposed to be removed. We are proposing a portion of the driveway to be reinforced turf in the back-out area, which will help mitigate against surface runoff off the driveway. I think that pretty much sums up the site plan. I can turn it over to Teresa, and then we're both available to answer questions.
Okay, thanks, Mike.
Good evening, Teresa Sprague, Blue Flax Design.
Teresa, could you, I'm sorry,
Yep.
speak up a little?
Yeah, sorry.
Thank you.
I was just looking down at the screen. Teresa Sprague, Blue Flax Design, here for Robert McCormick. Let me just pull up my plan. And I do have some images that we can walk through if you'd like, and I do have hard copies of those dated. Jennifer? Oh, okay. Well then. Go where? here we go. Thank you. There we go. Thank you. Okay. So, existing conditions on the site from a vegetation perspective, the lot is well wooded, with mainly an oak overstory. Sorry about that. There's, a large cherry tree that's currently overhanging the dock on the bank. Vegetation existing in naturalized areas, which are primarily found on the west side of the property, include a mix of native and non-native species. English ivy, Asiatic bittersweet, covering a lot of the trees and shrubs. Other invasives that we noted on site are Norway maple, Japanese barberry, non-native yew and forsythia are also present. Poison ivy and greenbrier present. Poison ivy currently makes up about 60 to 80% of the ground cover layer on this particular site. Native vegetation within the naturalized area include arrowwood viburnum, baccharis, goldenrod, and American pokeweed. So if we kind of look back here at some of the images. Sorry, too much juggling. I want to go back to the boards.
Yes. I think everybody does.
Yeah, it's just so much easier. So here's a picture of the entrance onto the dock, and you can see on either side, this is mainly where the invasive vegetation is located. It's starting to crawl up into the trees in these areas. And then we have, again, more of the invasive vegetation climbing up into the trees, mainly bittersweet throughout these areas here. And Jennifer, I have copies, and just a closer-up image of the bittersweet with the yews behind in the naturalized areas on the property. Poison ivy, this is just to the, if you're facing the water, to the left of the dock. This is the other thing, is I want to bring both plans up at the same time. So this is this area that we're showing in green right here that we're proposing to do mitigation planting. Oops, it's this one right here, which is basically bare. There's a little bit of poison ivy on the ground layer. Again, the proposal would not be to eradicate poison ivy, but just to prevent it. It's currently growing up through the deck of the dock. So just to remove it from those areas, but then basically plant down into it, just manage it so it does not become overwhelming to the native vegetation that we're proposing. Close these out as well. This is the area shown directly to the north of the dock in the green area here. You can see that, again, there's no shrub layer. There's really no ground cover layer other than the poison ivy growing in the area. Again, the goal here is not to remove the poison ivy except for the areas where it's growing down into the pathway and up through the decking, but just to plant around and in it and manage it so that it does not overtake the proposed mitigation vegetation. This is the bittersweet growing up the trees. Again, the proposal is simply to remove, cut, treat the bittersweet, allow it to biodegrade before removing the vines from the trees so that we don't damage the trees. Just another image of the English ivy that's also overtaking the trees in this area. These pictures were all taken in September. Some groundsel bush, significant amount of poison ivy, which is perfectly fine, but kind of intermingled with English ivy. So pulling that English ivy out of there to allow a ground cover layer to become established, a native ground cover layer. And this is just that image again to the north of the deck where we'd be proposing to plant this understory area. So overall, we're proposing to plant, as Mike pointed out, 1,400 square feet of mitigation planting, of which 885 square feet of that is located in the lawn area, 515 square feet sparsely vegetated ground on the coastal bank itself. In addition to that, we're proposing approximately 2,300 square feet of invasive species management and restoration on the coastal bank, with a total of 116 shrubs, including black chokeberry, clethra, inkberry, bayberry, viburnum, some more baccharis, and a spattering of sweet fern in the areas at the top of in the buffer zone mitigation area. So with that, I'm happy to answer any questions about the plan while I find the other battery to this.
Thanks, Teresa.
Thanks.
Maury, want to start off? Oh, I'm sorry.
It's okay,
Jen.
ma'am.
I'm having a bad night when it comes,
It's
I'm very
okay.
sorry.
You can just ignore staff, that's fine. Teresa,
Yes.
find the battery?
No, but I'll find it
Okay.
before I leave tonight.
Couple of things.
Okay.
One, I would like to see, so what I counted was you're removing or you're doing 2,380 square feet of invasive species removal. And pretty much the only real shrub you have in there native is the poison ivy.
We have also some bayberry, viburnum, and then the baccharis down at the
Baccaris,
bottom. Yeah.
okay.
Yep.
Um,
And then the trees, of
Because
course,
then
that
I
are
counted
existing.
out of that area, you're only installing about 33 to 35 shrubs.
Right.
It's not a lot.
No, it's not, but I think that given the amount of canopy cover on the bank and then the fact that there are other native vegetation on the bank, so basically what we're removing are the vine material that's growing up through the trees and up into the trees, so that would be the bittersweet. There's not like a large number of shrub honeysuckle or other large invasive shrubs here, so it's really vines that are kind of overcoming and overtaking the trees. And then, so you can see there's trees, trees down in here. So we'd be proposing to kind of plant in the understory, leaving the canopy in place, and then obviously protecting any of the native shrubs that are down here. The poison ivy area is mainly here, where it looks like it must have been disturbed because of the dock installation, I'm presuming, here and here. So we're just revegetating this entire area thickly and densely with shrubs to manage the poison ivy. And the rest of it just enhancing the understory and an area that's, reasonably well vegetated with canopy and then other native understory shrubs.
Okay, I'd like to see some more of the baccharis down on the edge. just
Yeah,
to
we can
protect
definitely.
To protect that little fringe marsh
Absolutely, we
a
can
little
do
bit
that.
more.
Yep.
I'd like to see additional baccharis along that water's edge.
Okay, yeah, we're only proposing 3, so we can
Three.
certainly
And
bump
yes,
that up.
I think that needs to be bumped up quite a bit.
Okay.
The
So, like-
note that the yellow areas that are bare post-invasive species removals will be reseeded and with grass and wildflower mix and planted with shrubs as needed. Who determines as needed?
Well, the shrubs that we're proposing are being planted. So obviously, if we determine that there's more bare area than what we anticipate with the shrub removal, we would certainly work with staff to vegetate any bare areas that are left over. I don't anticipate, frankly, we will do any seeding, like if we're pulling some of the English ivy to get this seed mix established. There's a significant duff layer here that I'd like to just leave in place and not disturb. I'm thinking the areas where we're going to be seeing bare ground is where we're pulling the English ivy.
Yeah.
Yep.
Up in that, yeah. I know.
Yeah,
Okay.
exactly.
So that'll be a condition that after the invasive removal and replanting that we meet
Yes,
to go over it.
absolutely. And we'll increase the baccharis to about 15?
That sounds good.
Okay.
That makes me a lot happier, because your smattering of
Sweet fern.
sweet fern, my favorite plant, is, almost 80% of the actual shrubs you're gonna put in the 2,380 square feet of invasive removal. So I wouldn't call it a smattering.
Yeah, well, it's in the mitigation area, and basically, as you know, rather than putting a wall of shrubs that people are gonna be tempted to prune, even though we know that they're not allowed to do that, transitioning from a fairly lower shrub layer to a higher shrub layer, just helps with the transition from the lawn up.
Probably have some sort of requirement for the single rail fence.
Yeah, I
then,
think that makes
because
perfect sense here.
Sweet fern will just,
Yep. I think that's completely appropriate in this case, yep.
well, that's my just comments. You have to square that with the board. Anything else, Brendan?
Goals and objectives, goal 2, you say replace one tree being removed, whereas Mike is saying no trees are being
I
removed?
think that was, yes, I apologize, we can certainly correct that note. So I think that was when we were first thinking that this proposed area of reinforced turf was going to be asphalt or not pervious driveway. So, excuse me, we can adjust that note.
And
So
that
it's
would be
not-
that 14.
That
inch.
14-inch oak, that's within the B zone. This one here.
So that's not coming down?
That's not coming down, no.
You can build that with the porch and everything right there?
I think that we were more concerned about the driveway being an issue in here, because we're creating new driveway, but it's simply gonna, the whole idea is, yes, it'll be used for backup, but mainly for overflow parking, so it's not something that's going to be used regularly. It won't need to be plowed. So reinforced turf seemed to be appropriate to reduce the amount of impervious surface.
How far down do you have to dig to install the proposed reinserve?
Just,
Forced turf.
yeah,
excuse me.
just, 10 inches, 8 to 10 inches, so I don't think it's gonna cause significant root damage. It's plastic, basically, the reinforced turf is plastic grid
Okay.
that's installed and then filled and then seeded, just to help displace, pressure.
Okay. That's all, Madam Chair.
All
Anything
right.
else, Brendan?
Thank you. Maureen?
The objective of the view corridor? I
Oh,
don't
yes.
See that on any plan?
Yes, it is on the plan.
Oh, it's on there.
It is
Rick.
on
It's
there.
this one.
Yep,
Oh, okay.
it's right here, it's these pink, they're
Pink-
kind of
pink
faint, but
dots.
yes, so we are proposing to maintain a view corridor in accordance with Falmouth wetlands regulations, so no wider than 25 feet wide. Again, that's why our attempt to keep some of the shrubs lower so that there's not continual disturbance within the view corridor area. And then, so they're pruned, no trees are limbed. I think it's higher than 15 feet and shrubs are maintained. So these shrubs will all be maintained or will grow to about that 5-foot height range. And then as we go down slope, there'll be no need for pruning any of these to be maintained at that height to keep that view open from the deck and the house.
It wasn't on Mike's plan, that's when I was looking at.
Oh, yeah, sorry, it's
Okay,
on
and
that
then the next question I have, it's for Mike. We know how degraded Perch Pond is. And the Perch Pond people are always asking us to do something about Perch Pond. I do not see a denitrifying system here. I don't see anything to improve the water quality or anything else. So could you tell me why they're not going to propose a denite system?
I haven't had specific conversations with them about it. I know that it's not a requirement, and I know that most of my clients are typically not super motivated to spend the additional money.
But they want us to dredge Perch Ponds, their boats can get in, so that and that was their big thing that they came in front of us, was water quality. And if nobody is going to take the torch and run with it, these projects, and actually, we do have the charge to protect water quality and shellfish. So nitrogen, we know, is an impediment and a degrading
Yes.
aspect to the water. So
I'm not gonna disagree with you
okay,
about that.
so we can condition a denitrifying system, or you could continue this and maybe discuss an option for a denitrifying system that would be practical for the client.
I'm happy to discuss it with the client. I don't know if he will agree, and I'm not sure that you are, I don't know that it would be appropriate to have a condition. I suppose that's up.
Yeah, we've been
You-
doing it, Mike.
You have been doing
Oh,
it.
yeah. There's several of them in West Falmouth that we
It's a
had to.
different circumstance, though.
Well,
Why is it a
have to
different
say-
circumstance?
Well,
West Falmouth Harbor is degraded, and so is
it
Perch
is.
Pond. It's actually in worse shape than West
the only
Falmouth.
thing I would say to that, and I'm not disagreeing with anything that you're saying, I'm just trying to give you this perspective, which is, this septic system is replacing an old failing substandard septic system. It's much more than 100 feet from the pond. It meets all of the setback requirements of the Town of Falmouth Health Department and Title V. So there's a presumption of a certain level of protection if you meet those setback requirements. That being said, I could continue the hearing if you'd allow me to for 1 week to have a conversation, but I can't commit to it without speaking to my client.
Right, I wouldn't, well, that's why I'm recommending that you do, and if they understand the value of their property in Perch Pond, and that it makes sense to do their share, it will improve the water quality there over time. And
Well, we also have to realize that people are probably resistant to doing these things individually because they feel as though their one D-night system isn't going to contribute to the greater problem of Perch Pond, which there's a lot of reasons that the quality of the pond is.
Right.
Not the least of which is like surface water runoff from roads,
Right.
town roads that discharge. All of Mara Vista was just sewered, so there should be a significant improvement because of that. This section of Falmouth wasn't identified to be sewered. But that all being said, maybe you should consider regulation changes that would require some nitrogen loading calculations, like some other town conservation commissions do have that, and it's within your purview to do that. I don't know that if it's not in the regulations, I don't know that you can mandate a condition in this case because we meet all the setbacks, is all I'm saying. If we were asking for relief, it would certainly, from a setback, I can see that it would certainly be within your purview. That all being said, I will still talk to my
Okay.
client.
Well, that would be great. No, it would be very helpful. And then the only other thing is, I just don't think the board should think that poison ivy is an invasive species, it is a native, so, yeah. And I'm glad that you're just taking it away from the walkway and interplanting. And Jen covered all the rest, thank you.
Thanks, Maureen. Kevin?
No questions.
Courtney?
What Maury's suggesting is a difficult dilemma. And philosophically, I absolutely agree with her. I think, when people, in a situation like Perch Pond, when people make improvements to their property around that pond, one way to alleviate the thing is to put denitrifying systems in. So I agree with Maury on that. The dilemma is, interestingly enough, that as a commission, we sat in a joint meeting with assorted other bodies, including, I believe, the Board of Selectmen, in which they talked about sewering, and it was a kind of a catch-22. As I was told, what if I put in a denitrifying system and spend $20,000 and then the sewer comes along? I'm forced to connect to the sewer. So this kind of creates a tough dilemma, frankly.
And in fact, if I could interrupt for a second, the Water Quality Management Committee has identified this area for sewering next.
2026.
2026. It sounds like a long way off, but to ask somebody to spend all that money for something that's
All right, I
in
just
the
don't want to
works.
see their name on the petition for the dredging because of the water quality, because that's, I think, where I get a little tired of listening to whine.
Yes.
And then they whine, and then they think it's all our fault that we're not dredging, but none of them are doing anything. They didn't stop fertilizing their lawns, and they don't do anything about their septic. So,
My impression is that for the most part, the Preservation Association, Perch Pond Preservation Association has not been requesting that again. It may be going through another round of preparation. I don't know, but my recollection of that meeting anyway that we were all at was that it was not a Perch Pond resident who spoke up about the dredging. It was somebody else. Anyway, moving back to the business at hand here. I interrupted you.
Yeah, no, that was my only point. I mean, other than that, I have no problems with the project as proposed.
Thanks, Courtney. Mark?
Yeah, I'm glad to see you put Mr. Porter on this. This particular job doesn't need it because there's nothing growing in that vista except a couple tree trunks. Maybe
Some
20 years.
invasives.
But I am, I guess, somewhat in agreement with, I think, Jen's comment. We've got essentially a barren bank. There's nothing, very little growing on there, and you've got a few shrubs filled in. I certainly hope that you, as your notes on the plan say, plant it with shrubs that's needed. Personally don't want to see a bunch of grass growing there. I'd like to see shrubs where there's cleared area, and there's going to be a lot of cleared area, more than these shrubs will fit. So I think we're gonna have to go back and not necessarily continue, but come up with a planning plan, which is a little more complete, maybe as you get the work underway.
Hey, Peter?
Yes, I'm glad to see about four things. The proposed house is moved back. The impervious space in the Zone A is reduced. Dry wells to reduce runoff, and reinforced turf in the driveway to reduce the runoff from the driveway. And to the controversial subject of septic system, the existing system is a cesspool, which is close to Perch Pond. The proposed septic system is Title V, which is over 100 feet from Perch Pond. And that will be better for Perch Pond. Additionally, several town officials have recommended that anyone in the T-ticket path area don't improve their septic systems from cesspool to Title V, because in about 5 years, they expect sewering to come through. And probably for this case, for this configuration, you would have to improve it to Title V, but the controversies should be settled when the sewering comes through. So, thank you.
Steve?
He said it all.
Yeah, okay. Jamie?
Nothing to add.
All right.
So,
Also
Madam
got
Chairman,
nothing to
we did talk about a continuance to talk to my client, but frankly was unaware of the plan this was earmarked for sewering in the relatively near future.
Well, just to be clear, it's earmarked by the Water Quality Management Committee, which is, significant, but I think that plan, I think it needs to go through state approval or something before it's, the official plan. However, that's the recommendation, so.
Well, without speaking for my client, I suspect if it's on the horizon in the not-too-distant future, I expect he's going to, when I speak to him, the answer is going to be what we might expect, that he'd like to not be required to put it in. So I don't know if there's any value to continuing it for me to ask him that question, to be honest with you. If the board feels differently and wanted to condition approval upon that, if you felt as though it was within your authority, we could deal with it as a condition. We could, I suppose, request reconsideration, or I don't think he would ever appeal anything like that. But I don't know that a continuance of a week is warranted to find out what I probably already know. I'm not saying I disagree with the problems with Perch Pond. I'm just saying I can almost predict what he's going to say.
I hear you. Well, it's a matter for deliberation. I can't tell you what the outcome on that is going to be, of course.
I won't be asking for a continuance.
What you said sounded reasonable to me.
I don't think that I'm going to ask for a continuance.
Mark, do you want to see a revised plan from Teresa?
Well, there's a caveat on the plan that says we're gonna review that
Yeah, my only
once we're
concern
halfway
was,
through the job, I think.
because the majority of the invasive vegetation is vine material, that once we remove the vine material from the trees, I just don't know for sure. So I certainly, that's why we put the note on the plan that we could come back if we found that we needed to add more woody vegetation on the coastal bank. The goal here, obviously, the areas where the woody vegetation would be located are outside of the proposed view corridor, so it's not a matter of us trying to not put shrubs in because we are trying to preserve any view or anything like that. It was just a matter of exploring what's actually native that we're able to protect on the ground before proposing we're gonna put in 50 shrubs when really only 25 will
You're gonna
fit.
put in 15 additional or 15 total?
We're gonna put in the 15 Baccaris additional to the 3 at the,
Okay, so
edge of the salt marsh.
Total of 18.
Yes.
Okay.
But as for the rest, I think we could probably condition
Mm-hmm.
that, you know.
And they'll know after they do their first round.
Right, exactly, after we do the initial invasive species management, which would happen this winter.
There won't be any it didn't say any mechanical.
No, this is all hand
by
removal.
hand.
Yep.
All right.
With that, I make a motion to close the hearing and take it under advisement.
All right, any other comments or questions from the board? Anything else from the public, the representatives? All right, all those in favor of closing the hearing say aye. Aye. Opposed, unanimous, so moved.
Here.
Yeah, I don't really care.
Where you get it right
Back again.
submitted at. I'll have Brendan next.
I can just put, can I put each one?
All right. Now, where are we? Paul and Patricia Hogan, 112 Racing Beach Avenue, Falmouth, Massachusetts, for permission to perform maintenance on existing riprap wall, remove invasive plants, and restore with native species.
Madam Chairman, again for the record, Michael Borselli, representing the applicant, along with Teresa Sprague from Blue Flax Design. Together, we represent Paul Hogan, who owns a property at 112 Racing Beach Avenue. You may be familiar with this property. Mr. Hogan, over the past several years, has been before you for a few different things. Most recently, we had asked for an extension on a more recent order of conditions that allowed him to do maintenance to the existing riprap by way of filling the voids or as chinking the voids with stones as necessary. Mr. Hogan has lived here for several years and is very tuned into storm action and doing his best to make sure that there's no compromise in this seawall that would result in him having to come back for something more aggressive in the form of a repair. So he's, over the years, been very proactive to try to maintain it. At the last hearing, when we asked for an extension, we had sort of exhausted our extension request, so we were, it was recommended to file a new notice of intent to basically ask permission to do the same thing and get 3 years of life to continue to maintain the riprap. So we're here for that activity, as well as plan to manage the invasives between the riprap and the house, which is really the more detailed aspect of the project. The work to chink the voids has been historically performed by Bill Armstrong, very familiar with the property, local contractor that works with stone masonry on a regular basis. Access would be through this path area labeled construction access. The stone is actually delivered by hand and carried by hand. There's no mechanical equipment used here to do any of this. He pretty much babysits this wall on a regular basis for Mr. Hogan, and it's been a good activity. It has resulted in no major problem with the riprap since I've been involved with the property. The property's located on a bluff on Buzzards Bay. There's a coastal bank, which is effectively the riprap. There are a few flood boundaries that are on the property. You can see the blue line goes right through the house. It's the boundary between a VE 23 in an AE 16 zone. And the associated 25-foot boundary is also shown, and in the bottom, there's a little finger-like projection of a different VE, VE 18 in this case. There's not really a lot more to talk about on the site plan that that would really help understand what the project is. I think the project, from my point of view, is very simpler than what Teresa would like to describe to you. So I'm here for questions, and I'll turn it over to Teresa so she can go over her plan with you.
Okay. Thanks, Mike.
Good evening again, Teresa Sprague with Blue Flax Design. Here to talk about this just takes too long. To talk about the land management portion of this project. So just by way of a review of what's happening here as far as what's happening from a vegetation perspective, we're looking at about 6,113 square feet of proposed invasive species management and restoration in the vegetated buffer along the top of the coastal bank on the western portion of the property. It's currently a mix of both native and invasive vegetation, and I do have some photographs here, which I also have. Let me see if I can do this. Open these all at once. Okay, so we've got some photographs of what's happening at the top of the coastal bank. So you can see there's a mix of porcelain berry, there's a lot of solidago in here, a bunch of bittersweet and some rugosa rose. There is also a little bit of beach plum and bayberry that's really struggling to survive underneath all of this here. Let's see. Oh, that was the other one. We can do this. Yeah, this is looking down towards Racing Beach Ave, down in this area here to the south. In this area to the south here, in this photograph here, looking down towards Racing Beach. Again, you see this is all bittersweet. Covering, there's some bayberry in here that's just surviving at the edges, but mainly covered with bittersweet. Just an up-close shot of that bittersweet. This is standing at the beach path off Racing Beach Ave, looking back up towards 112 Racing Beach. You can see there's some rugosa rose poking out in here, velvet grass in the foreground. These pictures were taken in June. And then just a significant amount of bittersweet overtaking. There's shrub honeysuckle here, located up at the top of the coastal bank. Another view up. Whoops. I don't know what that is. Did I run out of pictures? Yep, okay. So those are the images of what's happening here on the coastal bank. Again, a mix of bittersweet, porcelain berry, vine, honeysuckle. The invasive vegetation throughout this area here is mainly vine. There's some large shrub honeysuckle here happening on the southern side of this property, as well as bayberry and beach plum that are really being outcompeted. In addition to this project, we're proposing there was some mitigation previously required for some work that's happened on the property here in the north. They replaced some eastern red cedars at a significant size, 5 to 6 foot, several times, and they're just getting desiccated. They're just burning out. So what we're proposing to do is remove those dead eastern red cedars and replace them with smaller eastern red cedars. We're proposing 2-gallon size. And then also intermix those with beach plum in order to get that entire mitigation area planted. At this point, putting in anything much larger than a 3-foot tall cedar is just simply not surviving. It's just so exposed up here. What has survived is that we are proposing to remove, and unfortunately I don't have a photograph of it, but you may see in this Google Earth image right here, there's one pitch pine that's growing right up against the deck. It's in this location right here, kind of squeezed between 2 deck areas. It's a volunteer. It started growing in. The homeowners liked it. They thought it was cute and sweet. And now, of course, it's getting larger, and unfortunately, it's it's now becoming a concern for them, and it is very close to the house, so we are proposing to remove that one pitch pine. In addition to that, this plan, there's 170 square feet of area that's currently typical landscaping. There's one dead tree in here that's within Zone B, and but generally, this whole area is typical landscaping. A significant portion of it is outside of the conservation jurisdiction, but we are proposing to enhance that, again, with all native plantings. So with that, I'm happy to answer. This is all handwork. We're looking at 186 shrubs that will be replanted in here, including bayberry, beach plum, some fragrant sumac, and Virginia rose. We are proposing to keep the rugosa rose on this bank. We'll be flush cutting it in order to treat the invasive vines and then allowing it to regrow. It's, certainly it's not native, but it is providing stability and wildlife habitat value. So we're not proposing to remove it wholesale, just flush cut it and allow it to regenerate. Obviously, there's no natural heritage endangered species priority or estimated habitat on this site. The goal 3, as far as meeting the property owner's functional goals, is simply to replace those 3 wind-damaged eastern red cedars and interplant them with beech plum, and then remove that one pitch pine that's right up against the deck. So with that, I'm happy to answer any questions about the vegetation management plan and restoration.
Thank you, Teresa. Jen or
Just
Brendan?
one question. Brendan may have a question. Teresa, do you think the Rosa rugosa is going to outcompete the beech plum?
I don't think so. It's coexisting now. It's really the bittersweet and the porcelain berry that are taken over.
Right. And can we condition that once all this is done, we can go out there and look at it? and if we-
Absolutely. Yeah. Yep. Absolutely.
Anything else? Brendan, do you have any?
No questions.
Jamie?
You clarify the new walk
The new
on your plan, it's not on Mike's.
Oh. Actually, I think that's a leftover from a previous plan that maybe Mike has. Yeah, so I'm sorry, that's not, we did not add that. There's a small patio that's existing here on this northern corner, and there's a little stepping stone walkway out to it.
I'll speak to it.
Okay.
It was a new walk that you approved, now it's existing. So the label just isn't.
This is from that NOI you were talking about?
Yes.
Sorry about that.
Thank you.
I don't have any questions.
No
Peter,
questions.
okay. Mark?
Yeah, I've got a couple questions. I looked at that bank and it's pretty heavily vegetated right now. Perhaps it's a mixture of invasive and non-invasives, but
It
it
is,
sure
yes.
is nice and dense. And then I looked at the area which you have this picture of, area of typical landscaping,
Where is that?
just off to the side, the north side of the property, and the picture looks nice, but when you're actually looking at it from a vantage of 6 foot, there's a couple isolated plants here and there. It looks
Oh, in this.
awfully sterile.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Yes.
And I sure hope the rest of this hill doesn't end up looking that sterile when we're done. I mean, that's,
Tell you what's going
to some
back.
extent, you're driven by, I suppose, our regulations, 3 feet on centers, whatever. You end up with a mixture of plants that look like somebody's foundation planting, not like natural, any natural vegetation. I don't know what we can do about that, but I'm not happy with what we end up with, especially when it's a large area like this.
So
That
this
whole
is
area End up like this picture.
this area here where the split rail
Outrageous.
fence is located.
Yeah.
Is it that area, or
It's
is it
this
the
area.
on the other side where it says existing native plants?
Existing
between-
native plantings, right, on the north,
Where
Yeah.
is this?
I think that's north.
Between the new existing walk and the trees to be
Yes.
removed?
Oh, so this was done, I guess, under the previous
We need to
filing.
No,
look
no,
at-
nothing
we
to do
need-
with your project, but
Okay.
just noting that that type of planting, which probably met our standards,
Mm-hmm.
Mark, I'm not sure.
doesn't do the job.
Yeah.
Mark, we need to look
How
at the old
recent
order.
is it, Mark?
We need to look at the old order because I need to look at what was approved and what's there now.
So if you look at this satellite image, it's this area here that Mark is talking about.
Right.
Gotcha.
Well, I know exactly where it is. And
Okay.
I can envision the old project. I just have to pull the file.
Okay.
How recently planted is that area?
Well, that was required mitigation for one of the previous projects, and it was probably planted in the last 5 or 6 years, so.
But that doesn't look like required
It
mitigation.
should be looking better by now.
6 years, nothing happened.
all.
Right. I just want to clarify, because the image in the photo that Mark is looking at in the land management plan is of this area here,
Right.
not this area.
Oh,
So the
okay.
photograph is this area,
Oh, okay, sorry about that.
but
Okay,
the,
well,
yeah.
point I was-
But this area was planted, and there's a significant amount of mulch, I think, in between the shrubs. Yeah, I know what you're talking about, yeah.
This looks like somebody's landscaping. It doesn't look like a
If it's mitigation, then I think shouldn't
protected
be
area.
mulch, right?
Well, it was done at a time, well, first of all, I can tell you, this received a certificate of compliance, and it's in the same state it was at the time. It is the planting that was required for a previous order of conditions, and it was at a time, there was a time where in the mulch matter is a fairly, it's a new sort of concept, no mulch. This was prior to that. So this met the requirements at the time and actually got a compliance. It's the way to say it better, I guess, is it's the right size and spacing of plants that were on the plan at the time.
I understand what
But
you're
I understand what Mr. Gurney's also saying about it not looking naturalized.
Yeah.
Right, and I don't want the rest of it to look like that when we're done, especially often when we talk about removing invasives. Sometimes it ends up with nothing left at all.
Right. No, I understand. In this case, there is, the bayberry and the beach plum that's existing in this area will remain. So we will only be removing the invasive vines that's growing over. And then this area will be entirely seeded, so there'll be no bare ground, there'll be no mulch in this area. When we first plant the shrubs, we do a little bit of a mulch ring around just to protect them and help hold in some water. But then all of this area in yellow, any bare ground is seeded with the grass mix that's showing on our plan. And then, so that there's ground cover layer, shrub layer, and then the only thing that's not being put out here in the front is tree layer. And there are no existing trees with the exception of this one pitch pine that's right up against the house. We're just replacing the trees that have not survived and have been replanted several times in this area by another landscaping firm.
And we'll require you to water it, of course, and
We will,
got to be aggressive about helping these plants grow to get bigger than these little tiny
yeah,
one-gallon shrubs.
yeah, this is,
After 5 years, they're still one-gallon shrubs.
nope, this is gonna need drip irrigation for this woody vegetation throughout. There's overhead irrigation is not really appropriate for shrub planting, and it just won't work in this site because of the wind. Yep.
Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Mark. Maureen?
I just had a couple questions. 186 shrubs over 6,000 square feet. I just don't get that number. I really don't. I'm looking at the yellow, I'm looking at the plants you're planting.
Yep.
And I really think that it needs a lot. Now, I understand you're keeping the Rosa rugosa.
Right, exactly.
But you don't indicate that on this plan, what patches of Rosa rugosa.
Well, right, we didn't, I mean, you saw the pictures, there's such a tangle of vines, it's covering the Rosa rugosa, but you can see it, it's blooming, it's in here and throughout, and here's, for instance, all this bayberry that's poking its head throughout. So all of that will be remaining.
Well, it's hard to tell with your plan that, where these pockets are, and if you even.
It's hard
pick
for
the
us
big-
to tell in the field until we remove the vines, frankly, so.
Well, I think maybe then evaluation after the vines are hand removed, then we move forward, because I think 186, we used to have 3-gallon, 3-foot on center, and Mike is correct. The only thing is that he is incorrect, is we did allow mulch, but we didn't allow you to rip all the seedlings, all the root rhizomes, when they start to shoot up the bayberry and the beach plum. The landscapers all rip those all out and just keep it perfectly manicured, and that's not what they're supposed to do. The mulch is only supposed to keep them moist and to let them keep the weeds down as they grow, but they just turn it into landscape, which is inappropriate, because beach plum and bayberry especially will just blanket after a very short period of time and keep sprouting up, but if you mulch it and cut it off all the time, it won't. And I think maintaining the rugosa rose is wise, because it's holding the bank.
Yeah, absolutely, we agree.
But I do get a little concerned with all this, when you look at the yellow area with the grasses,
Yep.
just fescues and, pathrush and black-eyed Susans and things like that. I mean, they're great, but they don't hold coastal banks.
Nope, I agree.
So,
Yeah, no, we
Those
definitely.
maybe further up for the people to look at the pretty flowers than, on a coastal bank that needs to, and then to keep invasives out of a black-eyed Susan is not easy.
Well, right, so again, the purpose of the black-eyed Susans just germinate very quickly, they peter out very quickly, but they actually do help hold the niche while other things are getting established. So we don't rely on black-eyed Susans to be a long-term species in this seed mix. It's really a short-term species. It's gonna bloom
So
quickly.
what's your long-term species in there?
Mainly the grasses, so the Agrostis perennens, the little blue stem.
Yeah.
The
Fescues and your,
Yeah, the fescues
Bent
again
grass.
are more of a cool season, so they're definitely, the red fescue is a cool season, so it's just meant to germinate quickly and hold. The Solidagra sempervirens, the pathrush, again, it's a long-term species, but it's meant to germinate quickly and really just hold the space and not overwhelm the shrubs. We were using mixes with a lot taller grasses like Indian grass, big blue stem, switchgrass, and what we were finding is we were having such a hard time with those grasses overwhelming the shrubs that we've planted that we've gone to a lower grass mix and had a greater success with shrub survivability, which I know is the goal here. I'm just having one heck of a
2
night
inch-
tonight.
cedars that big around, little, blue
Yeah,
stem
no,
ones.
we agree, but in this particular case, the property owner, Mr. Hogan, has replaced these cedar trees several times.
And I
It's-
totally agree with starting with smaller ones,
Yeah.
but not 3. If you're cutting down 3 large ones, you're gonna give us,
Well, they're
a half a
dead.
dozen. that
They're- I mean,
will-
they're-
Because
they're
they're not all gonna live,
Well,
even the
the-
little ones.
yeah.
So.
I
give
think we'll
us-
have greater success with the smaller size, something that's 3 feet tall versus, what they've been putting back, which were probably what was required previously, which would be 4 to 5 or 5 to, I think they're 5 to 6s that are in there now.
But I agree with Mark. I think that,
Yep.
we really need to make this look natural and more
Absolutely.
than 86 shrubs.
I mean, again, it's
6,000
certainly
square feet.
something that we can meet out with the site, and I'd actually welcome the commission to meet out there with me, because, through the restoration process, to actually see how it goes.
Well, I think the the
Okay,
owner would
go
have
ahead.
to allow us, because on some sites, we're not allowed.
I want to add one thing about the site, and Mr. Hogan is very concerned about the bank. I'm sure he'd be amenable to more plants. I mean, he's always concerned about erosion on the property.
Is it eroding now?
No, but he's,
He doesn't want it to.
No, he doesn't
Yeah.
want it to.
Right.
That's why he's doing the stone chinking and trying to like manage the invasives and just,
It's
he
good.
never wants to have to come back with a
Disaster.
significant erosion,
Right.
yeah.
Yeah, and this is really the vegetated buffer. The bank itself is armored. So this is the vegetated buffer at the top of the coastal bank. It's not actually the coastal bank itself.
Okay, thank you.
The pronunciation is chinking.
Mhm.
Well, that's unfortunate, but,
I agree with you.
yeah, I know. Does it, I confess I did not walk along what I suppose you'd call a beach. But I could see several spots from looking over the edge. And you could see where the activity had been done, and they looked in good condition. I'm just wondering, is this something that occurs probably more often lower in the wall? And is this an activity that you could think will be just an ongoing activity ad infinitum?
I can tell you, as long as Mr. Hogan owns the property, and as long as he receives permission, he's going to continually have this wall babysat, and maintained as best he can. The void maintenance, let's use that term if you want, is sort of random year to year. Sometimes at the lower, if the wave action is such at the base, it'll cause a little bit more. Some areas, because of freeze and thaw, some of the voids open up and they just jam it with more small stones. So it's sort of like every spring they take an inventory, they walk it, and they make sort of a game plan, and then they execute the plan, and then they look at it the next spring. It's that kind of thing.
So, given his location, I wish him well in the fight.
Quick follow-up on that, Mary, if I may. There's no mortar going in, right?
Absolutely not, no.
Okay, I'm gonna just condition that.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. yes.
Ben's doing the work? No,
Bill Armstrong.
Bill, oh, okay.
Yeah,
I'm just gonna put that as a condition.
Sure.
Because sometimes, unfortunately, we do,
Yep.
not from those two individuals, but we do see
yes.
mortar being used, and that's just
No.
not a good thing.
For the record, I didn't see any.
I don't want him to use it. Okay.
Well said, thank you.
Okay, thank you. Courtney?
This project, at least for the buffer restoration aspect of it, is an interesting thing because I was on this commission, I think you may have been, Mary, too, when this project first came in front of us, and we were very concerned about how this buffer was created. And I think Maury's comments about, landscapers coming in and thinking they're doing the right thing and not allowing things like bayberry and so forth to do their thing and spread the way they should. And obviously, if that had been allowed, perhaps there wouldn't be such an issue with invasives. I'm concerned as you do this, that, you end up throwing the baby out with the bathwater. And I hope you'll take real care to make sure that the natives that are there and surviving are not just sort of flush cut out of existence.
Absolutely. No, and the thing that we do is, and we've done this on other projects, is we do flush cut what's in the, so that we're protecting it. And honestly, at this point, a lot of times what happens is once we remove the vines, they just snap at the first big wind. So it's better if we just flush cut them, the root systems are intact, they're healthy, and the plant will put on 3 or 4 feet of growth per year. So, and then at that point, it's not working against the vines that are smothering them over to keep them, to allow them to regenerate.
More, you can tell me better. If you're gonna put cedars in there, should they be transplanted field cedars better than nursery?
That's pretty much what they use.
We're proposing northern-grown cedars here, yeah. That's the problem
That's
with the
all that
5 to 6 footers. They come up from Georgia and some great red clay, and the balls fall apart, and that's it, they're done.
it.
Yep.
Okay, thanks. Anything else?
I make a motion to close and take it under advisement.
Second.
All right, yes, Mike?
Unless we have received it late in the day and Jen knows about it, I don't think we have a DEP file number on this yet.
Do we have a DEP file number?
I checked at 3:30 and
We do not have one on this.
No?
Okay.
so,
We have to
Okay,
continue
there we
it.
go.
Thanks, Mike.
I hope we have it by next week. Should we continue to next
I
week?
withdraw my motion to close. Who seconded it?
Withdraw my second.
Okay, I make a motion to continue until December 5th,
Second.
Okay,
waiting for the DEP.
all right, anything else from the board? Anything from the public? All right, all those in favor of continuing until December 5th, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, unanimous, so moved.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, now our last
Oh, thank you.
NOI at 26 Ferry Road has been continued also to December 5th. So, next we have continued request for a hearing under a notice of intent. Augustine Santola, 123 Shorewood Drive, East Falmouth, for permission to remove a portion of the existing licensed pier and replace with the construction, licensing, and maintenance of a new private residential pier. In light of your resubmission, that probably should read a little differently at this point, but, because there's also a proposal for Phragmites removal at this point, so.
Good evening. For the record, Raul Lizardi with Cape and Islands Engineering, representing the applicant and the owner, Agustin Santola. The property is located at 123 Shorewood Drive in East Falmouth. This hearing was continued, but it was not open. Before we actually continued the hearing, we got in touch with staff, and a couple of changes took place on the project. So the plan that we have revised to this submission for tonight is one that only proposes reconstruction of the fixed portion of the pier and Phragmites remediation or eradication plan. So originally, the project had more work to be done, and it did not include the Phragmites eradication. This revision has been done so that only proposes the pier. There's an existing pier that's been licensed. It was installed or constructed under another condition from 1994. It's an unusual type of construction. The posts supporting the initial portion of the pier are 2x6s. Then it transitioned to a little higher profile supported by 8-inch diameter piles. What we are proposing to do is to remove the portion of the structure that's supported on the 2x6 timber posts and instead construct a new pier 4 foot wide on 8-inch piles. The 8-inch piles will span 21 feet on center. That's more than twice the current spacing of the 2x6s, that is about 10 feet on center. The proposed decking is going to be elevated to the level of the highest portion currently on the existing pier. That elevation is 5.9. That elevation on the decking provides 4 feet or more above the existing salt marsh. The existing portion that's currently at elevation 4.3 for the decking will be raised to that same 5.9, so it's more than 1.5 feet higher than existing. It provides more than the 4 foot of cover over the salt marsh. Then we are extending a portion landward for the pier. So the project is not going seaward. In fact, the existing 6 piles, the existing ramp, and the existing floats are to remain, but we are extending landward. Currently, the owner has to walk down the coastal bank, then walk up a ramp onto the pier. That portion of the walk up to the pier is going to be removed. We're extending the pier 15-foot landward to span over the coastal bank. So the homeowner is going to walk from this backyard up to the deck for the pier without having to walk down the bank. The existing decking for the surface is going to be removed, and in place we're going to use 50% penetrating grading. The project or the site property has recently received a certificate of compliance for the house reconstruction, and with it, it included some mitigation planting that are on either side of the existing pier. Currently, the Phragmites are creeping up the bank and also causing these plants to suffer. So the homeowner has been cutting the Phragmites, but this plan now proposes eradication by a process that was approved in 2005. This same property was part of an order of condition from 2005 that included eradication of Phragmites for 6 properties, 4 properties north of this same one and 2 properties south. But the Phragmites in front of these properties were never cut down. So with this notice of intent application, we propose to take on that task from 2005. We're using the same methodology that was approved in 2005, cutting down and treating it with some chemicals. I believe I have the name. Glyphosate, if I'm saying it correct. It's found in some Roundup products or rodeo product. This project, because we're increasing from an existing 3-foot wide pier to a 4-foot wide pier, it's more than a 10% change in footprint of the pier, so we'll eventually, after this step, go for a Chapter 91 license. The pier is higher, but it is a stronger structure. It's supported on piles, supported on stringers. Currently, the existing pier is a design or construction that I've never seen before, but we believe the new construction is more stable. If there's any questions, I'll be happy to answer.
Thank you, Raul.
I just have one quick question, Mary, I'm sorry. And I might have missed it when I went outside. Raul, how, are you following DMF's new recommendations for the 1 to 1.5?
We are not. We did mention it to the client, the homeowner. We said that that was one of the recommendations from the letter we received from Fisheries, and he'd rather not have a structure that is much higher than the others. We are doing an improvement in that we're increasing the height of the decking by 1.5 feet, and we're also including grading throughout the entire length of the pier. So we expect that this is a compromise to allow light penetration to the marsh underneath it, instead of going to a 6-foot tall structure.
You might see the 1.5 to 1. Or 1 to 1.5, however it's written. Just letting you know, Raul.
The 1.5, it is a recommendation, it's really not a requirement, so.
And this board has made it a practice to always follow DMF's recommendation as best I can. Just letting you know.
Okay, Kevin, you'd like to start?
Yeah, speaking of your compromise proposing railings throughout, I admit I wasn't out there this week, but I think I was out there the week before. And actually, hat in hand, I walked out onto the float. And I notice here you've got the existing ramp to the float in dotted lines, which indicates that there's a railing. And the existing ramp in the existing profile, both proposed and existing, shows that there's some sort of railing on that. Now, is that a different ramp from the one I walked down, or?
That could be a drafting error. It was drawn that the existing one was a ramp with rails. We're not proposing to change the existing ramp. So if the existing ramp doesn't have a rail, it doesn't have a rail.
I noticed that.
The majority of the structure doesn't have a rail, but we are proposing for the fixed portion of the pier, we are proposing rails.
I think we'd need a revised plan in that case. Courtney?
He's covered my issues, and I'm concerned about the lack of rail there.
In other words, you'd like to see a railing?
I would.
Okay. You've been heard.
Okay, I think with the recommendation from DMF, one of the first things in their recommendation is, and it doesn't say we would like, they say, as a result, graded decking should not be used as a substitute for adequate height in design characteristics. And the dock set at 1-to-1 ratio resulted in loss of approximately 50% of the underlying vegetation, while taller docks set at 1-to-5 had lesser impacts, resulting in about 30% losses to low marsh vegetation, and no detectable impacts in the high marsh. So I think they have a valid concern, and I think we should as well. So I always support DMF. They know their business about salt marshes more than I do. So I think we'll probably need a revised plan if everybody else thinks that. And at that state, that if it goes to that height, you will need a railing.
Okay. Janie?
If this is approved, does it need to be re-licensed?
Right. If the footprint of the pier changes by 10% or more, it technically requires a new license. And in this case, just by going 3 foot to 4 feet, that's already something between 25 and 33% increase. So we're
Okay. Oh, I have, thank you.
Okay, Steve?
Thank you. What happens to the floats in the winter? They remain?
The floats are supposed to be removed and stored in an upland location, and
Okay.
that could be conditioned as such.
It's getting a little late. Okay, so that should be conditioned. Now, could somebody help me again with the 1.5 to 1?
So the technical term is, if you propose a boardwalk over salt marshes, and it's 4'1", what fisheries recommend is that the separation from the top of that decking to the surface of the marsh has to be 1.5 times that width.
Okay,
So 1.5 times will be
pretty
6
simple.
feet.
Right.
Right now, we have it at 4 plus. Doing it to 5 feet would just, actually, doing it to 6 feet will require a new ramp, because then the existing ramp will be too short, and it will make it too steep. And actually, on that regard, I would like to hear more from each member to see if I'll just get back to the client and say that 6 feet separation it is. So far, I'm seeing 3, that's definitely a yes. 4.
I would support it also.
There you go, Raul.
Right.
So, and if that's the case, it looks like I wouldn't have the vote to approve a project with a 4-foot minimum separation. I'll be happy with the condition that the revised plan shows there is 6-foot minimum separation over the marsh.
Great.
Thank you, Raul. And if you, to do that, with the new ramp, it's not gonna extend any further out into,
Right, we're not going further than the existing floats. The floats are what they are. Those piles for the float are gonna stay where they are. So what's gonna happen is the ramp holds its place at the beginning of the float, and we work our way back. So if anything, because it will be probably a longer ramp, the portion of the fixed pier may end up sooner. We'll have to work with those elevations. What determines the length of the ramp is at low tide, how steep that ramp becomes.
Right.
If it's too uncomfortable, then we have to deal with removing the existing piles that we're intending to keep, to push them closer to the shoreline and provide a longer ramp. But if that's a revision that the board feels is the way this gets approval, I'm happy with doing that revision.
Okay, thanks. Anything else, Steve?
No, thank you.
Peter?
I have a question about the height of the proposed dock. The prints refer to 5 foot, and the text and 5.3 Pier construction methodology. It says minimum of 5 feet above grade. Is that 5 feet measured from the average high water mark to the underside
Yeah.
of the dock or the top of the dock?
So this is another height requirement. So the 4 foot that we're proposing that we're gonna revise to 6 is to the decking. The 5 foot is for lateral public access. So what we want is at the point of mean high water or nearby, a person can walk underneath the structure, so you have to provide 5 foot clearance. Now, the term clearance is from the surface to the bottom of that horizontal element. So that's a different height requirement, and we are providing it. That's why what we're proposing is that first section, that first bent on the pier is slightly higher than the remainder of the pier to provide that 5 foot separation underneath.
And it would have at least 5 foot clearance.
Yes, but the way we're talking right now,
No problem?
actually, that one will be no problem, because that one, the decking is already at 6 feet.
Peter, the 5-foot clearance is a requirement, correct me if I'm wrong, of Chapter 91, and it is a specification in DEP's guidance for small docks and piers.
Yeah.
Okay?
But it's
Public
two,
access requirement.
it's two different things about height requirements.
Yeah. And now DMF is kicking it up to, if you have a 4-foot wide dock, 6 feet, to allow for more light penetration on, over salt marshes.
Well, the 6-foot requirement might be for the decking, but you have,
Still gonna have the
structure under
clearance,
the
yeah.
decking.
Right.
And I'm
Yeah.
just concerned about the clearance.
Yep, yep. They have to abide by all of the regulations, and in this case, recommendations by DMF.
Okay, no further questions.
Thank you. Mark?
No comment.
I have a question, about the Phragmites removal. Is it required that this be done by a licensed applicant?
Yes.
Okay, so it's gonna, I don't know what they have in mind, but that's gonna be a requirement.
I mean, they can cut it, they just can't apply a
It's a very
herbicide.
difficult task.
Yeah,
I use
and,
colloquial language.
and, well.
We'll have to know who's
there are
doing
these
the,
things about not doing it in the wind and.
we're gonna have to approve the contractor to do the
Yes,
work.
Yes. Did you hear that? Anything else? So,
Bless you. Are you continuing it to give us the revised plan, Raul?
If we can approve it with the conditions of a revised plan that
That's
shows
fine with me.
the 1.5 to
one.
1 ratio, and the new ramp with handrails.
Right.
And then we have to receive the
Certainly.
the revised plan prior to the.
Let me see your
issuance,
notes,
right?
okay, you can have it.
Oh, God, yeah.
Oh, yeah. I just don't want the wrong plan to get into the contractor's hands.
I'd make a motion to close the hearing and take it under advisement.
Second.
Second,
All right, anything else from the board? Anything from the public? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, unanimous, so moved.
So you get me a revised plan quickly? Thank you, Raul.
Okay. Request to extend the existing order of conditions. I believe these are simple. Louis Soligowski, 51 Toby Lane, Falmouth, Massachusetts, DEP 25-4061, request for 1-year extension.
Excuse me, Madam Chairman. Yes, Toby Lane is requesting a 1-year extension to finish up the project.
And you are recommending that?
Yes, we are.
All right.
So move.
Second.
All right, any questions, comments? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, unanimous, so moved. East Marine Corporation, 89 Falmouth Heights Road, Falmouth, Mass, DEP 25-4153, request for a 1-year extension.
We are recommending a 1-year extension.
So move. Second. Whoever.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, unanimous, so moved. Compassionate Care ALS Incorporated, 17 Chase Road, Falmouth, Mass, DEP 25-4172, request for a 1-year extension.
Okay.
And we're again recommending a 1-year extension.
So move.
Second.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, unanimous, so moved. All right, request for a certificate of compliance, look what's back. Brendan
ready.
Zaltis et al., lots 4 through 11, Pond Place and Pierce Place. Is everything all set now?
Oh, I wish I could tease you, but yes, we finally have gotten the request to withdraw. It's right here. So they are withdrawing the request for a certificate of compliance.
Okay.
And Mr. Manganello does apologize.
No problem. Thank you very much. Okay. There's one last thing I need to.
Do we have to vote that?
Oh, we have to vote that?
No,
No.
no, they're just
They
withdrawing
withdrew
it. No.
Nothing to vote on. One last thing, did this email go out about the Charter Review Committee?
Yeah, I sent it to everybody.
Okay.
I know, because Betsy received it.
Okay, good. So, we've gotten this, invitation, I would call it, to, respond to these questions. We, we don't need to if we don't find them relevant to what we do. So I just wanted to, introduce the topic tonight, make sure everybody has the materials, and we can make a decision next week because they need to know by December 7th. So we'll meet on the 5th, and they need to know by the 7th whether we're going to be giving them any input or not. So, does anybody either not know what I'm talking about, or?
I started reading it, I didn't finish it all.
Okay.
I actually had to reference some of the stuff that they were saying.
Yeah, I had to read certain, the questions twice
Yeah.
before it, I started having a point of view about the whole thing.
Yeah.
Okay.
It's a lot to digest.
Yeah, it is, but I think it's actually not gonna be a big
No.
deal for us.
No.
It's just a
You
matter
need
of.
to look at it.
Yeah, exactly. Okay, so, please expect this to be on the agenda for next week's meeting, and we'll discuss and decide what we want to do by the way of input, whether we feel we should have input, and whether it should be in writing or send somebody to their meeting. Okay,
With that said, I make a motion to adjourn.
Second.
all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, unanimous, so moved.
Peter,
We're adjourned.